Thank you all for being here. My name is Lauren Weingarten. I will be your moderator for this evening. I'm a survivor, a credentialed victim advocate, trauma support specialist, and community builder. I'm the voice and founder of MTMV Community Support Network, one of the first social media-based communities for survivors and their supporters. This event is part of the words are hard. MTMV and Friends Community Cafe and Fundraiser event, a new series that aims to be a place of community and connection, celebrating all our unique, wonderful selves. Tonight, we are here to observe Sexualized Violence Action Month and learn about some important work to support survivors and how you can get involved. In the US, April is considered Sexual Assault Awareness Month. For many survivors, we want more than awareness. We want action. Further, when we single out sexual assault, rather than bringing awareness and action to all forms of sexualized violence, we leave victims behind. All victims of sexualized violence matter. There's so much work to be done, and all the speakers here are proof that there are so many different ways to get involved. The work they are doing is incredible, and our event attendees will have the opportunity to hear from a group of survivors, advocates, activists, artists, and allies who are actionizing their support for survivors. This virtual Zoom event is a fundraiser with all proceeds going directly to Forge, improving the lives of trans survivors since 1994 through empowering providers and connecting survivors to healing possibility. I don't need to tell anybody that the trans community is under attack, making it even harder for survivors to have much needed access to support and informed support. So if you're able to, please donate. Before we dive in, let's take a moment to review the agreements for the space. As we're joining from many different places, it can be helpful to come together with set expectations. Everyone in this space is responsible for maintaining a welcoming environment that is respectful, encouraging, and supportive to its members. Not that I'm concerned about any of these, but just to cover the bases, be polite and respectful to everyone in the space, avoid abusive behaviors and language, though profanity that's not directed at others is allowed. Not going to tell a whole bunch of adults that they can't curse. Your experiences matter, though this is not the place to disclose your personal stories of trauma or abuse. We have set speakers and a moderator for this event. We ask that you use headlines only in your comment shares, making references brief and free from any graphic details or imagery. If you are looking for support, you can reach out to me, direct message, or mtmvcommunity@gmail.com. Safety is the priority. You can step out anytime you need. We encourage you to engage. The comments are open. It's not required. Anyone who does engage in abusive behaviors or violates these agreements may be removed from the Zoom without re-entry. Thank you for supporting this community and grassroots effort. Let's get into it. I am honored to be in a community with you. So without further delay, let me introduce our first speaker. And I am going to ask folks to, there we go. All right, and we have Josh here providing ASL access. Thank you, Josh. Michael Munson is the co-founder and executive director of Forge, an organization focused on improving the lives of transgender individuals by building stronger connections, providing resources, and empowering growth through knowledge. His educational background is in psychology with an emphasis in trauma. Munson's work on violence against transgender and gender nonconforming individuals is groundbreaking, stressing the intersectionality between complex components of identity, experience, and societal constructs that both spur violence as well as catalyze healing for individuals and communities. He is passionate about engaging professionals to embrace these complexities and learn key skills to better serve their constituents. Welcome, Michael. Welcome,
Hey,
Ford.
thank you for inviting us and hosting this event and this fundraiser, which is really fantastic. And thank you for doing all the introduction, which makes my job like a lot easier. So, hi everybody. I'm really grateful to be here as one of two of us from Forge who are here tonight. I wanted to just share a little bit about who I am, who Forge is, to give you an idea of what we are, who we are, what we do, and why it's important. So Lauren gave you a kind of the work end of who I am, just a thumbnail of the other pieces of who I am. I've been Forge's executive director for the last 30 years. We've been around for 30 years. I've been involved with activism for a much longer time, since I was a kid, growing up doing lots of fun and different kinds of activism. I am an extreme introvert, but I love doing trainings and being in public, and then going back and hiding in my room. I'm a big nerd, and I love books, and I love work, and I like knowledge, and I like all of those pursuits of learning more things. And I'm really family driven. So that's a thumbnail of who I am. Let me tell you a little bit about who Forge is. Like Lauren mentioned, we are a 30-year-old trans anti-violence organization. We do a wide range of support and care for many different types of folks who experience different kinds of victimization. We predominantly provide training and technical assistance to victim service providers, allied professionals, so therapists, preventionists, healthcare workers, all of the people that support survivors of violence. And then we do a small amount of work, which is direct services to trans, non-binary survivors, communities, loved ones, allies, and folks that surround survivors. Our roots are definitely in sexual violence, intimate partner violence, realms of violence, even though now we are, I don't want to say branching out, but we're being more intentional about the work that we do around stalking, around hate motivated crimes and violence, around bullying. So, really being responsive to what's going on in our current world and the current issues that a lot of trans folks are experiencing. Our work, we really try to be trauma informed, which I think is always really hard to do, even though it's a good intention. We try to be empowerment based, and we try to be culturally responsive. So all three of those things are, to me, aspirations. They're things that we work towards, and we're never 100% good at. We've been federally funded since 2009, and we might have some more discussion about that as we move along today, since the world is a little bit different than it was 20 years ago. I just wanted to share a couple of things about kind of why our work matters. We're all here tonight, I think, because we care about survivors of sexual assault. We're here for, the SAM month events. And, I don't like to hierarchy like, well, who experiences more violence than others? So let me just say that trans folks experience high rates of sexual assault. Trans folks experience high rates of many other intersecting crimes and harms. So some of those things that we see frequently with trans folks who are survivors of sexual assault are high rates of stalking. More recently, we're seeing higher rates of doxing, or sharing that personal information on the web. We're seeing more technology-facilitated abuse and street-based harassment and assault. Trans folks experience a lot of barriers to receiving care and services and support. I think a lot of us who are probably here tonight know what some of those are, and we're not doing training tonight. We're just kind of giving a little bit of a thumbnail about who Forge is. But trans folks that want to receive support and care, like we all should be able to do, are experiencing barriers within mainstream services, and sometimes even within queer or culturally specific services. I think when we look at why it's critical that we are doing this work, I mean, it's survivors need support. Survivors are worthy of support. And we at Forge are really committed to helping providers do a better job at serving trans survivors and trans communities. We do find that that providers are really oftentimes very eager and interested because they want to do better. And so our job is to just help them get more confident, get more skills, allow them to do the work that they do well, but to also do it with trans survivors. I don't think it's any surprise to say that we're living in a world that's pretty anti-trans right now, and that has a lot of ripple effects. It's horrible what's happening in our country and in the world to a lesser extent. And that is impacting things like the rates of violence that trans folks are experiencing. We don't have data yet because it's going to take a while to get data if we ever get it. But what we are seeing is that more and more trans folks are experiencing sexual violence or sexualized harm, sort of in parallel with what's happening in our current world. So we're seeing more and more folks being directly affected or affected by people that they know, and the fears around what might happen to people's safety. Let me give you a thumbnail of the things that we do at Forge to help support the providers who serve folks, as well as the survivors who have experienced violence directly. Like I mentioned, we do a lot of training and technical assistance. That can look like a lot of things like webinars or being at conferences or being invited to support the work that somebody else is doing. For example, we do a lot of work with forensic nurse examiners. We do a lot of work with the coalitions, the coalitions across in every state. We like to create publications and tip sheets and things that are quick access for folks to improve their knowledge and skills. We do a fair amount of technical assistance, which is kind of like somebody calls and says, hey, I have this problem. I don't know how to deal with this. Can you help me? And we work with folks to become more better at working with trans survivors. The little bit of direct service work that we do is all virtual based, all internet based. So it can involve kind of webinars, kind of workshops, kind of events that support growth and healing through engaging folks with new skills or creating an environment that is celebratory or reflective or gives survivors some of what people have asked for and what they need. One of the cool things, just to throw out just a random thing that we're doing that was kind of a surprise to me, is we're going to have our first zine come out in about a couple of weeks. And it's the first zine that we've done in 20 years. So like it's something that was an idea from one of our staff people, and it's like really cool. And we've had an enormous response rate to it. So we try to be responsive in how we're engaging with the survivors that we work with and with the providers. Just to wrap up, I just wanted to let folks know that when we're working with folks and when we all are contributing to the health and wellness of trans folks who are survivors, I always encourage people to think about how are we fostering things like trans joy? How are we uplifting folks in communities that are experiencing a lot of pain and harm? So I'd love to just kind of leave you with a thought of like, how are you honoring or encouraging or enhancing or providing space for trans joy for survivors? So thank you for all being here. I'm really glad to be with you all tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And cheers to trans joy. My water and magnesium. I'll cheers to that. Thank you so much, Michael. Moving to our next speaker, we have Celene Beth Olsen. Celene Beth Olsen is a Latinx producer and filmmaker based in Salt Lake City, Utah, specializing in true crime across film, television, and podcasts. She had produced acclaimed true crime documentary series for major networks and platforms, including Investigation Discovery, Hulu, Oxygen, CBS, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Max, and ABC. Celene is also the creator and host of the podcast True Crime in Hollywood, A Personal Tale, which offers an intimate look into the experiences of trauma survivors, producers, crew, and industry insiders navigating the intersection of true crime and entertainment. Hi, Celene.
Hi. I forgot I'm unmuted. Can everyone hear me? First of all? Yes, I hope
Yes.
so. Yes, okay, good. Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Lauren for putting on this event. And equally, thank you, Michael, for sharing those words and again, creating this safe space for everyone. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. But first and foremost, hi everyone. So my name is Celene Beth Olsen. I'm a documentary filmmaker, producer, podcast host, but I'm also a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. Those are difficult words to say, but they've become an important part of my story. I started speaking out not just for myself, but for countless other survivors who haven't yet found a safe space to share their own truth. In 2020, during the height of the pandemic, I became an accredited victim advocate so I could volunteer on the rape crisis line here locally in Salt Lake City. I wanted to offer the kind of support I wish I had back when I was sexually assaulted in 2006 at the University of Utah campus. And an effort to help train medical professionals in trauma-informed care, I volunteered my own body to a SANE program, so a sexual assault nurse examiner program, where I underwent over 10 simulated forensic rape kit exams so that new nurses could learn how to provide compassionate, skilled care to survivors in crisis. It was one of the most vulnerable things that I've ever done, but it also is one of the most meaningful. But my work in storytelling, though, is deeply rooted in this mission. As the host of True Crime in Hollywood, A Personal Tale, I've created a space that disrupts the way we traditionally consume true crime. So too often these stories are sensationalized. The victims are reduced to characters in a plot, and the trauma is glossed over, and the norms of true crime and entertainment. I hope to aim to bring more empathy and accountability back into that narrative. That mission also inspired me to create Producing with Empathy, a workshop for true crime producers and crew members. Through it, I teach industry professionals how to ethically and respectfully engage with trauma survivors, how to build safety measures, and how to handle sensitive content with the care it deserves, especially when it comes to the producers and editors behind the scenes. Because what happens behind the scenes affects everything that ends up in front of the camera. And the people whose stories we're telling deserve more than just a good edit. They deserve to be protected and in a safe environment. But part of my advocacy has also been working alongside the Lauren McCluskey Foundation, a foundation that was created in honor of Lauren, a promising student athlete at my alma mater at the University of Utah, who was murdered in 2018 after her pleas for help were repeatedly ignored by the university and police officials. Her mother, Jill McCluskey, turned unimaginable grief into powerful advocacy, and the work they are doing to improve campus safety, relationship violence prevention, and institutional accountability is changing lives. It's been an honor to help share Lauren's story and carry her legacy forward. And today I'm excited to share that I've just been accepted into a certification program for mental health coordinating. And this is a role that's going to be just like intimacy coordinating. So ensuring emotional safety and trauma-informed care in creative environments. So the Association of Mental Health Coordinators is doing groundbreaking work. They are looking to embed mental wellness and safety protocols directly into the fabric of the entertainment industry. So I'm grateful to be stepping into that space next. My path as an advocate hasn't been conventional. It's been creative, deeply personal, and often incredibly hard, obviously. But I believe in showing up fully, honestly, and with purpose. So if true crime in Hollywood has resonated with you, if you believe in centering survivors, challenging the norms of this genre especially, and uplifting voices that often go unheard, I invite you to support the podcast. I've been honored to feature an incredible lineup of guests already, including MTMV's very own Lauren Weingarten, along with Callahan Walsh from America's Most Wanted and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I also had former Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crimes, Christina Rose, on the podcast, as well as powerful survivors like Julie Murray, Tara Newell, and so many others. So your support helps me keep these conversations going, amplifying these critical stories, and creating real change within the true crime entertainment space and beyond. So if you're wondering how you can get involved, my advice is simple. Just lead with empathy. You don't have to be a filmmaker or an advocate or even a survivor. Just be someone who listens, someone who believes, someone who's willing to challenge the status quo. Because advocacy takes many forms and all of them matter. So to my fellow survivors, your story is valid, your healing is your own, and you are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Celene Beth. That is, as a friend, peer, collaborator who sees how much work you put into platforming, recognizing survivors are the experts, and no one better to be doing this mental health coordinating. And I speak from someone who worked in the industry for years, and just the work that you're doing. Thank you for working to not sensationalize survivor stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Super excited. Next up, we have Ayanna Maddox. Hers is a survivor, organizer, and writer living in Charlotte, North Carolina. She is passionate about ending the child sexual abuse to prison pipeline, as well as improving youth reproductive and sexual health in the U.S. Her politics are rooted in Black queer feminisms and abolition. She's had the honor to be of service to her communities through different organizations over the last 15 years, like Me Too International, Girls for Gender Equity, the Firecracker Foundation, and Atlanta Jobs with Justice. Ayanna firmly believes in the healing power of survivors and advocates organizing for the social, economic, and political change we need. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I am so honored to be here with you all tonight. There are truly some powerful, powerful folks in this space, those who have spoken already, and I already know and feel those who are just in the room who decided to show up today. So I'm honored to be here with you all, and thank you, Lauren, for the invitation. I have just a few short slides that I'd like to share, really inspired by Lauren's emphasis on beyond awareness to action. So, my background includes both scholarly work in academia, researching the sexual abuse to prison pipeline, as well as organizing. And how does this all come together? Well, unfortunately, I became a survivor of sexual violence at 3 years old. And I survived violence for many years until I left for college, and then was introduced to other forms of violence and intimate relationships in my adulthood. And this was really disempowering, to say the least. And there were so many different tools that helped me process what had happened, my sense of self. And that included things like talk therapy, EMDR, swimming, running, having opportunities to just disclose to friends. But I have to say, the most powerful, most healing thing that I have done is join organizations and communities. It's through community organizing that I found a sense of self. I understood how to take back my power, how to build collective power. And so today I really want to focus on, well, when we say take action, maybe that could include community organizing as a tool of healing. And so I want to acknowledge that that's really always been our movement. Right. So as we're having this conversation, right, about a return to action really being about grassroots power, we know that there's a long history of movement work that has happened up until this point. And one of my favorite books is from Beth Ritchie, Arrested Justice, Black Women, Violence, and America's Prison Nation, in which she really talks through the history of the anti-violence movement in the United States and points out that while our movement really started as a collective of survivors and advocates coming together to support each other with their immediate needs, as well as thinking through how do we change culture? How do we change laws? It started there. Well, as time progressed and advocacy continued, we know that with the movement for the Violence Against Women Act in 1993, our movement becomes far more institutionalized, and there's far more focus on state-based interventions rather than community action and building community power, right? So this has always been our movement. And we know that. A couple quick examples is Recy Taylor, who unfortunately was assaulted by a group of white men who were not charged. And this was despite the fact that one of the men actually did confess to what he had done. And so there was community action and movement to raise awareness, to demand that there be some sort of action to actually acknowledge what had happened to this, at the time, young woman. And that was led by one of our movement forum mothers, Rosa Parks, in collaboration with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP. And this was 1944, right? So long before we get to VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, and before we even get what becomes Sexual Assault Awareness Week and then the month. So we're already organizing and campaigning, right? The DC Rape Crisis Center actually was founded by a group of survivors and advocates in someone's home, and that's in 1972. Again, people just coming together to support each other to make sure that we're addressing the things that survivors need. And I'm sure many of you know the infamous case of Joanne Little in my state of North Carolina, who was an incarcerated woman who had to defend herself against her jailer, and then was charged for murder for defending herself against that jailer. And so this becomes a huge campaign. Many people, saw Angela Davis, who you see pictured here, advocating on behalf of Joanne Little. So we know that we have this long-standing history, actually, of abolitionist feminists as well, talking about the intersection of criminalization of survivors, as well as the types of violences that we face as survivors, right? That's 1974. So I say all this to say, as we're continuing to talk about what the future of our movement looks like, I hope that we'll continue to take time to also dig back into our history and know that we've always been about grassroots power, grassroots campaigns, and especially in this moment where it's a little difficult at the state level as well as the federal level to figure out what our protections might look like legally. We're not sure what Title IX is going to look like. It certainly is a difficult tool to try and use right now, but what we always have available to us is our own individual power, and more when we join with our communities to build collective power to do what we can to support each other as survivors. And so as I'm coming to a close here, I just want to emphasize the power, the meaning of community organizing. And so community organizing is awesome because any and everyone has access to it. You don't need a PhD. You don't need any of those things. Any and everyone can be a community organizer. Community organizing, of course, is the work of bringing people together to take action around their common concerns and overcome social injustice. Community organizers reach out and listen, connect, and motivate people to build their collective power. And if you're looking for resources about community organizing, whether you're sharpening your tools, going deeper, or you just don't know much about it and you want to learn more, I've included a QR code that you can scan here that'll take you to a free online resource, the Commons Social Change Library, which has so many tools to dive into, learning more about what community organizing is, some of the frameworks for building power. What is power? What are different kinds of power? And how do you cut issues? Thank you for letting me share today.
Thank you so much. If you want to leave the slide up for a moment so folks can scan that on their camera. I knew, Ayanna, when you were like, can I send some slides? I knew that this was going to be amazing, and you did not disappoint. Feeling inspired. Thank you. Excellent, excellent. Next up, we have Cheyenne Wilson. Cheyenne Wilson, BSN, RN, PHN, is a dedicated advocate for survivors of sexual violence, a registered nurse, and the author of We Are the Evidence, a handbook for finding your way after sexual assault. Cheyenne is passionate about equipping communities, professionals, and survivors with the knowledge and resources needed to make informed decisions, fostering systemic changes to better support survivors. This is her book. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for holding this space. It's been wonderful to listen to the speakers already. I've been clapping over here and cheering for getting my cameras off, but everyone's been amazing, and I can't wait for the rest. Um, as a survivor and a nurse and the author of We Are the Evidence, this work is deeply personal to me, and I know that many of us are carrying stories that go unseen and unheard. So I want to thank everyone for being here, whether it's as a speaker or hosting or an attendee. It means a lot, and this is a great way to show support to survivors. I wrote We Are the Evidence after experiencing my own sexual assault while I was in college in Wisconsin and turning, looking for resources and not being able to find anything that was comprehensive and easy for me to understand when my trauma brain was it was frazzled, it was fried, it was hard to get through the day, and I needed something accessible and comprehensive, and that didn't exist. I remember going to the library and searching for something, and there wasn't anything available. And this was 10 years ago, which at that time, social media wasn't what it is now, and now there's a lot more resources. But I knew then that a resource needed to exist, and when I was preparing to go to court and I found documents that ultimately helped me feel like I could make more informed decisions about reporting, what to do with testifying, and how to create my own healing journey after. I knew that I really wanted to create a resource that was comprehensive for other survivors. So that's what I set out to do, and it was published last year, and I'm incredibly proud of it. I was able to get over 24 experts to contribute, which is a huge honor, Lauren being one of them, and survivors share their stories. And hundreds of other survivors share words of validation and encouragement. My goal with the book was for it to be informative, educational, validating, empowering. And yeah, so after the book came out last year, I realized that my work with advocacy and trying to create resources wasn't done. And I had worked so hard on the book and focused so much on creating that resource that I hadn't really looked to my community around me to see what I could do. And at this time, I'm also graduating from nursing school and seeing how re-victimizing the healthcare field is, just in general, and realizing how much work needed to be done there. So I made it a goal of mine this year, going into 2025, to get to know my community more, get to know what resources are available, where the gaps are, and figure out how I could help bridge those gaps, what barriers I could work to start to dismantle in any way I could. So my big goals this year are to help the healthcare systems in Minnesota and also get to know what needs to be done in order for restorative justice or transformative justice to be available to survivors. I've been able to do some trainings at the hospital, and I'm incredibly grateful because in Minnesota, the hospitals are very open and receptive and wanting that, wanting to know how nurses and doctors can be more trauma informed in their care. And that's been really encouraging. I know that's not the case everywhere, but hopefully with small steps, we'll be able to get more hospitals on board and realize the importance of being trauma informed. As we've been navigating the climate right now, this month, I've been reflecting on how to encourage people to get involved and be comfortable advocating in their communities. And so some things I've been encouraging is to think about what helps you to feel safe. When we're working on our own healing and our own safety, we're better able to advocate for others. And then to break it down. So some things that I encourage people to do is to call your local library and ask them to carry resources that you know are beneficial to survivors and can be a resource to them. A lot of people aren't able to bring books on these topics of sexual assault, sexual violence, domestic violence home because their perpetrator might be someone they're living with. So asking your library to carry those resources, purchasing resources that you know are helpful and putting them in those free little libraries around your community is a great way to also help those who live around you. I've been doing this for about a year now, and when I go back to those same little libraries, those books are almost always gone within a day or two, which breaks my heart, but also shows how powerful that one little act can be. So get creative and do some research, educate yourself on the realities of sexual violence, so that way if you have a friend or a loved one who comes to you, you know how to support them better. There's so many small steps that can be done, and I encourage people to do what they can. Thank you again so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will put my contact information in the chat for anyone who'd like to follow up.
Thank you so much. I love that. And I mean, yes, books, libraries save lives. I love the, little library, not little library, the free little library, whatever they call them. It's funny because they're called little, but they have such a big impact. And also, please go ahead and speakers, go ahead. Take a moment throughout and put your contact information, your handles, etc. in the chat so people know where to go support you, your work, if they have any follow-ups, want to get involved. Speakers, I have not read them so far, but there's been a lot of wonderful comments coming in support of all of you. So thank you, thank you. Keeping it rolling, we have Karina Hagelin. Karina Hagelin is a disabled, non-binary, queer femme artist, educator, keynote speaker, librarian, and survivor. Their interests include radical vulnerability, friendship, gossip as a site of resistance, disability, community care, self-love, trauma healing, recovery, zines, and creativity. Karina's expansive body of work includes making zines about healing, self and community care, and disability, a podcast about CPTSD and trauma recovery, workshops on trauma-informed librarianship, zine making, radical vulnerability, survivor solidarity, and community care, the Survivor Affirmation Deck, and a weekly-ish newsletter on the intersections of all of the above. Welcome.
Hi, it's so good to be here. So I'm here today to talk about zines, which are essentially do-it-yourself magazines that are made for passion, not profit. I started making zines about my healing process, as well as the politics of survivorship, radical vulnerability, self-love, and recovery as a way to process what I was going through, document my experiences, and as a creative container for really big feelings and a form of self-expression. Zines are an accessible and inexpensive creative medium that lacks gatekeepers and a long list of pricey supplies. Truly, anyone and everyone can make a zine if they so wish. Zines are ultimately an opportunity to tell your own story on your own terms and your own timeline. Zines are fabulous for so many reasons, not just for sharing your stories, but also for sharing knowledge, information, resources, for offering messages of hope and healing and solidarity, building and connecting with community, supporting and affirming fellow survivors, sharing coping, self and community care skills, processing trauma through creative composting, which I'll speak a little more about in a bit, challenging dominant narratives such as the perfect survivor myth, humanizing messy survivors like myself, and also offering tangible and actionable strategies for advocates, activists, and accomplices who want to support survivors. So on creative composting, this is how I view my artistic practice. I use the crap, aka the trauma, the abuse, the violence I've experienced. And through creating zines or other forms of art, I transform it into something new, something that is healing, inspiring, colorful, cute, empowering, and hopeful. Something that can nourish and support other survivors, like a community garden, but art. If you're interested in exploring, experimenting, and playing with zines as a medium for activism, I encourage you to come to a zine workshop. I'll be leading one a week from today. And if you're involved with any sort of group, bringing in someone in the zine community is a great way to empower survivors to create the things they want and need to see in the world, or for activists to have a medium for sharing knowledge, information, and resources, or for your community to practice self-care through creative self-expression. I am available for teaching these workshops. You're always welcome to hit me up at hello@karinahagelin.com if you're interested in bringing me in. At this point in my life, I've published over 70 zines. Many of them on healing, radical vulnerability, recovery, friendships as resistance, survivorship, community care, coping skills, and self-love. I create the things I want and need to see in the world for survivors to thrive. And I want to encourage you to do the same, to create the things that you want and need to see in a world where survivors are able to thrive. I create zines specifically for survivors, such as I've got my little assistant Chickpea here, my Affirmations for Survivors series, my Perzine or Personal Zine series, which include Femme Filth, Surviving Out of Pure Spite, and Healing is the Best Revenge, as well as zines on coping skills for CPTSD, community care plans, and healing through aesthetics. I also create zines for people who want to learn how to better support survivors, such as my mini zine, How to Support Survivors, which includes I think 20 some actionable strategies that are tangible and suggestions on how to get involved. And my longer zine, hi Chickpea, are you sitting on it? Yes, thank you. I Believe You, a resource on supporting survivors by a survivor. And finally, I'm currently counting down the last 4 days of the Kickstarter for the Survivor Affirmation Deck, which is a collection of 40 rainbow, colorful, gorgeous cards featuring affirmations for survivors. And I could really use support in sharing and funding, which I'll share in the chat. Thank you so much for having me tonight. It was really lovely getting to share my love of zines and survivors with you.
Thank you so much, Karina. Yes, both survivors and zines are magic. I love all the color and just how you take such complicated, dense, complex topics and make them into these bite-sized zines. So thank you. Next up, we have Chris Lake, a neurodiverse native New Yorker who has dedicated his career to behavior analysis, advocacy, and community building. In 2014, he founded Community for a Cause, a nonprofit supporting vulnerable populations in New York City, including the homeless, veterans, and survivors of sexual violence. Through grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, and coalition building, he has successfully influenced legislative change and forged community partnership across all 5 boroughs. His work includes co-chairing a 24-organization coalition of survivor advocate nonprofits and conducting statistical and behavioral analysis on wrongful convictions and crime deterrence. His recent statewide research examined every recorded wrongful conviction for sex crimes in New York, while his nationwide studies analyzed crime reduction patterns linked to legislative changes across 23 states. His focus is on legislation aimed at ensuring justice for survivors who were intoxicated at the time of their assault, This research and advocacy helped secure co-sponsorship from over half the state assembly for a key bill, Assembly Bill A101, committed to both top-down policy change and grassroots action. Chris continues to seek reliable methods to drive meaningful community impact. Welcome, Chris.
Lauren, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I want to take a moment to thank all the fellow speakers. I want to also thank Josh, the interpreter. I see you. Thank you for honoring us. As Lauren said, I'm an advocate who aims to collaborate. When I first started working with survivors of sexual assault, that was 5 years ago, and I had the idea because my charity is one that I forged to be open to create new branches. And I came across some people who had suffered the trauma of sexual violence. And I asked myself, what more can I do for them besides be an open ear? And I said, well, Chris, you can advocate. So maybe let's look towards legislation. In New York State and in 25 other states, if someone is intoxicated voluntarily and they're sexually assaulted, there is no penal code to actually guarantee them justice. There is a guarantee if someone was involuntarily intoxicated, like your drink was spiked or someone forced you to drink. But if you drank of your own volition, unfortunately, in New York and 25 other states, it's not a crime. You may recall a situation in Minnesota in 2021 where a woman came home from a wedding. She was inebriated. Someone sexually assaulted her. They took him to court. The judge realized we can't actually find him guilty because we lack the language in our penal code. As you advocate, recognize the fine print, recognize what language is required, what language is missing, what language is being played with when you decide to change things. That's really where policies shift, whether it's funding, whether it's penal code, whether it's restorative justice. Understand the literal penal code, the number of the law, where it is, what degree it is. It's dry, I'll admit, but the nitty-gritty is where you really make the transformative change. So I started advocating for this issue, and I realized as a senator friend of mine had told me, Chris, you want to build coalitions. And so that's what I want to talk to you guys about, coalition building. A lot of times survivor advocacy groups and organizations tend to work in silos. I invite anyone who feels that way to start reaching out and finding who is in the next zip code that you can work with, who is in your city that you haven't reached out to yet, and find the common causes. There's so much overlap that all of us are working for, whether it's local or national, that we can all lend a hand in some small way. I'm going to put a petition in the chat just for an example. Any one of you guys want to sign that and spread that along, please do. But what we did initially, I had a coalition of 2 groups. Lauren was one of my members and another group of high school students in the Bronx. And we met with legislators and said, like, listen, we need support for this bill. You want to build co-sponsors on the bill. You want to understand who are the committee chairs that are the gatekeepers, and you want to gain their support. You want to pressure those. You want to find out what is my pressure point. You want to really understand the legislative process. First, the Assembly and the Senate has to write a bill. Those go through committee, they're voted on, and then it goes to a floor vote, ideally. And there's people in between that you want to call: the sponsor, co-sponsors, committee chair, governor. And depending on what state you are, there's people who have a lot of influence in their respective houses. So you want to get on their good side. And that's where getting a coalition really helps, because you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself. And you're going to want to, right? Because you're going to be passionate about this. It's going to keep you up at night. And it's important to share the load. It's really important to find others who are willing to work with you, who are willing to support you, who are willing to counter when you're tired. And you're able to counter when they're tired. My co-chair, Lizzie Asher, she's from Cure Collective. I met her at a fundraiser in response to the Minnesota case. And she invited a legislator who was primarying the sponsor of the bill. And while we were there was a gentleman named Stefan Turkheimer, who then was the interim vice president of RAIN. And the 3 of us are chatting, and we said, you know something, we should all probably work together on this. And the new coalition was built. And from there, we just started adding more and more and more organizations. And now we have over 24 organizations, both local, nationally, and internationally, because we have no more included in our groups. And we all work together. We meet every Wednesday at 11 on Zoom, and we send petitions, we phone bank, we send letters, we charge the PowerPoints to make the change and recognize how to play the game. And this is the hard part, I would say, about advocacy when it comes to grassroots, is having the measured patience to continue to work with people who you might not like. And I'm going to stress that again. You're not necessarily going to only work with people that you like to make change happen. As a Black man, I'll use the example of Martin Luther King. If he had taken that approach, we wouldn't have had a civil rights movement, because Lyndon B. Johnson was quite racist. And he was well aware of that. And that didn't stop him. He didn't say, oh, you use the N-word, I can't be seen with you. That doesn't make progress. Yeah, so you have to build bridges. You have to work with some people who you might like, some people you don't like. You can have your limits, obviously, but just recognize that sometimes you have to be delicate and play the game of politics. We've been working on this bill, the Voluntary Intoxication Exclusion Bill, for the last 5 years, and we've learned a lot in terms of how to build friends and build relationships, and that's really the key. You want to build bridges, as many as possible, with legislative staffers especially. They will be most receptive to working with you, giving you information, having your cell phone readily available so you can communicate, plan press conferences, plan rallies, plan things that will create a publicly available scenario that you can tie back to the legislators and say, see, the public cares about this. I'm going to wrap it about there. Again, check out the petition. The coalition's name is Justice Without Exclusion Coalition. My charity is Community for a Cause. You can find me at communityforacause.org, on TikTok, on IG as well. If you guys need support for things that you're working on legislative-wise, whether it's a letter of support or a memo support, reach out. I will support you. And do the same for others. Find out who are working on the same bills and create that coalition. Big or small, guys. We're all working for the same thing. We're all working to make things more powerful for all genders, all people who have been touched by the scourge of sexual violence, and we build better together. Lauren, thank you again for the time. Josh, thank you again for interpretation, and everyone else is working behind the scenes. Keep fighting a good fight.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, yes, yes. Everything you said. I think you're going to put the petition, bill information, etc., in the chat. I think we can wrap things up in about 5 to 7 minutes. Josh, is that okay with you? Okay, excellent. And if anybody else needs to go, please do. Finishing up the night, we have Emil Rudicell from Forge. Emil has been a community organizer and activist in a broad range of overlapping movements with a focus on anti-violence movements, reproductive justice, and youth leadership. They bring over 20 years of experience working in direct service, providing crisis intervention and peer counseling. Emil has supported youth organizing and conflict resolution groups. Emil joins Forge from 7 years of statewide work preventing and responding to domestic violence through supporting service providers with training and technical assistance. They dream of a world without violence, with communities that take care of each other and have the support everyone needs. To get there, Emil's work has focused on helping communities and organizations with strategic planning, capacity building, improving services, and working towards social change. Outside of work, Emil loves the ocean and all of the weird, fantastic nature of the land around them. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I had forgotten all of that was in my bio. It basically just said everything I wanted to say. As everyone was talking tonight, and thank you so much to all the other speakers and organizers and advocates here, the phrase like we need each other was really in my mind. That's something our communities have been talking a lot about the past few years, and especially the past few months of, to get through this time, we need to take care of each other, and we need all of us. And trans communities really know that. We need to be looking out for each other, and we need folks who are going to stand up and say no to some of the attacks on us, to all of the attacks on us. And I think many people really spoke to that of how we don't want to go it alone, that there are so many opportunities for us to support survivors. And one thing, a thread I wanted to pull out was just how much each of us can use our own passions and our own strengths and joys to do that work, because there's such a range of ways that people heal, ways that people care for each other, and stuff that people need, that each of us has a role to play. At the beginning, I was thinking about some of the survivors we've talked to at Forge, and often, we talk to folks who haven't been able to get help other places, and maybe mainstream services don't acknowledge the types of violence that they've experienced, or mainstream services think they're too much, which is just a ridiculous phrase. But they often need a lot of things to get to a place that feels stable or even joyful to them: housing, healthcare, healing support, food, friends, people who will call them by their name, all these different things. And that can feel really overwhelming at times, but it also means that there's work that all of us can do. Because while none of us are going to be able to provide all of that necessarily, we can each contribute in our own ways, through arts and zines, through history and connecting our work back to movements, through coalition building and direct services, and really through systems change. A lot of the folks that we work with and talk to are experiencing these major systemic barriers, not just related to the massive transphobia in the world, but also to racism, sexism, and ableism. We know that trans folks have high rates of disability and neurodivergence, and the ableism in the world adds on barriers. So we need to create a world that really supports all of us. And Lauren mentioned, my background in prevention. I think my passion is really thinking about how we can make that world where all of us get to live without violence and do the things now that move us towards living in that world. So I like to just take a moment and imagine like what a world without violence would look like. How might you live? Where would you live? What would it mean to thrive, to have joy? What kind of food would you eat? Where would you connect with people? What would your gender feel like? All of these things are stuff that we can start to imagine now. And that dream gives us part of the roadmap for like the work that we need to do to really prevent and end violence. And all of that is connected to listening and learning from survivors and from our own voices, so that we're all connected in both supporting survivors and ending violence. And those two things can't be separated. And I will leave it there. I'll keep it super quick. Pass it back to Lauren. But thank you to all the speakers and everyone who is here.
Thank you. And to echo some folks in the chat, that is an excellent, excellent prompt. Thank you. Thank you to Forge. Thank you all for showing up for survivors. Thank you to our amazing speakers. Thank you, Forge, for all the work that you are doing. Thank you all who have donated. I need to do the final tallying. I think that we have raised around $150 for Forge. I know that organizers and survivors are historically like the ones without the money. If you do have any and want to donate, I put the link in the chat. And I just want to end on a quote, and I feel like it goes really well with what Emil shared. I love this quote from Eddie Ndopo. That's N-D-O-P-U. I think that another word for activism is imagination, because it's about this idea of being able to envision a world that doesn't yet exist. I think that's what the job of an activist is to be able to create and create into being or create into existence a new world order that is really equitable and that is really fair and that's just and sustainable. Advocacy is not a luxury, it's a necessity. We advocate for our survival. Thank you so much. Share your love with the speakers. Follow them on social media, etc. Thank you for actionizing your support with survivors. We've covered a lot of important ground this evening, and I hope you take it and share it with your own communities. Quick second, since we did talk about some heavy things, let's shake it out. Shaking it out. All right, thank you. Reach out anytime, and thank you for supporting survivors. Go team.